Did you know? The Japanese release of Donkey Kong Country has many differences from the international release, and these differences can be seen the moment you start up the game. The Japanese version has a completely redone title screen with artwork taken right from the Japanese box art. Unlike the international version's tiled title screen, which only allowed for a total of 16 colors per 8x8 tile, the Japanese title screen is rendered in an 8-bit color depth mode. This allowed for 256 colors on screen, resulting in a much higher quality image. This version also adopted changes to several enemies. In all other versions of the game, the Rock Croc enemies are invulnerable to any sort of move, but in the Japanese version, they can be killed by DK's hand slap attack when curled up into a ball. Interestingly, this would later be possible in the Game Boy Advance version of DKC. Another change is that it now takes Diddy Kong 2 hits to kill Manky Kongs. The first hit will make Manky Kong flinch with a single frame of his death animation, pushing Diddy back. Much like with the Clump and Army enemies, the Japanese version also has numerous changes made to levels, most of them making the game easier, with things such as extra DK barrels added and enemies that were either repositioned or removed altogether. A rather obscure change that was made is in the blackout basement level. The Japanese level stays dark for 46 frames and is illuminated for 77 frames, compared to the international version, which is 62 frames for both light and dark. These changes are extremely unusual, as it's often Japanese developed games that are made easier when brought to the West. The map icon leading to DK's treehouse is also removed in this version, likely because it seemed unnecessary as the player can't access that part of the map anyways. Donkey Kong also has several animations that went unused, including an alternate victory animation when he wins a bonus game or defeats a boss, and an attacking animation strikingly similar to the one DK uses in Donkey Kong 64. Cranky Kong has a walking animation that was scrapped but would later be recycled in the GBA remake of DKC. Cranky also has a large amount of unused level advice and would originally give tips for nearly every level in the game. While we're on the subject of Cranky, many fans are unsure about how he relates to Donkey Kong. This is mostly due to different contradicting sources. The Donkey Kong Country series states that Cranky is the current DK's grandfather, but in Donkey Kong 64, Cranky refers to DK as his lazy, good-for-nothing son, and it seems as though Rare wanted to maintain consistency with this statement, as one of the head writers of the game, Lee Loveday, stated that the current DK is in fact Donkey Kong Jr. grown up, and any statements that say Cranky is his grandfather were to be ignored. Though given Lee Loveday's sense of humor, some fans aren't sure whether to take this seriously. In a previous episode, we mentioned how Diddy Kong was originally supposed to be a redesigned Donkey Kong Jr. before he became his own character. Rare originally wanted to name him Dinky Kong before they settled on the name Diddy. Dinky Kong would later become Kiddy Kong's Japanese name, and much like Diddy, Kiddy went through several different names before his was finalized. Some of the names suggested were Baby Kong, DJ Kong, and Tiny Kong. The name Tiny Kong would be given to another Kong character introduced a few years later. At the time of Microsoft's acquisition of Rare, the studio had 3 known Donkey Kong games in development. As Rare no longer had the rights to use Nintendo characters after the buyout, all 3 games were being retooled to feature Rare's own IPs. Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers became It's Mr. Pants, and Diddy Kong Pilot became Banjo Pilot. But the one title that never saw release in any form was Donkey Kong Racing. For over a decade, information about this game was limited as it didn't get very far in development. But recently, a number of details have surfaced about it, as well as its retooled iteration, Saberman Stampede. In February 2014, a NeoGAF member under the alias Shiggy posted several pieces of artwork from unreleased Rare titles. 2 of these games were Donkey Kong Racing and the game DK Racing was turned into, Saberman Stampede. The concept art for Donkey Kong Racing reveals that Cranky Kong and Lanky Kong were going to be playable characters, and that traditional go-karts were considered at one point during development. Almost 2 weeks following the artwork leaks, more information about these titles were released in an interview with former Rare employee Lee Musgrave, who was the lead designer for Stampede and who also created Donkey Kong Racing's trailer. He talked about how Donkey Kong Racing wouldn't limit the player to a single animal, saying that you would jump between different sized animals with different properties during a race. And when the game was reworked as Saberman Stampede, how many extra features were added to the initial design? Over the course of 18 months, Saberman Stampede went from being strictly a racer to a more open world adventure in the vein of Diddy Kong Racing, and one of the key mechanics of the game would be raising the animals you rode. This mechanic would eventually take center stage as the project continued to evolve, to the point where Musgrave described it as a cute version of Grand Theft Auto set in Africa. Due to lack of focus from the team and the fact that while it had some interesting mechanics, was missing other important features such as a story, the game was eventually cancelled, ending development on what started out as a Donkey Kong themed racer. Musgrave is quoted in another interview saying, "I still look back to the early racing game design and think we could have done something great with that." Shortly after Rare finished work on the GBA port of Donkey Kong Country 3, they thought about making an all-new DKC for the Nintendo DS, as they felt like they had a good amount of experience with handhelds after porting the trilogy. However, it was merely a thought they had, and they decided that making an all-new game on hardware they were still learning about wouldn't be the best idea, choosing to tread familiar ground by porting Diddy Kong Racing instead. Also, considering that Rare was owned by the competition, Nintendo may not have felt comfortable having them revive a franchise they themselves owned. Eventually, Donkey Kong Country 4 would become a reality in the form of Donkey Kong Country Returns, which was released exactly 16 years after the very first DKC. Both games were released in North America on November 21st, and the games that made up the trilogy would also be released in late November. The newest addition to the series, Tropical Freeze, was slated for a November release in 2013, but was pushed back to February 21st of the following year. The release date still holds some significance, however, as 2014 marks the 20th anniversary of the Donkey Kong Country franchise. That's all for today, but don't forget to subscribe to Did You Know Gaming on YouTube and follow Did You Know Gaming on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you also check out DidYouKnowGaming.com, and if you like this video, check out some of our other videos. Hey there, I'm the Cartoon Gamer. I make videos related to what my name implies, and over here is a review I did a while back for Tropical Freeze. If you haven't noticed, I love me some Donkey Kong, and I think more people need to know what makes this game so great. See you later!